Welcome to the College and Career Ready podcast, your go-to resource for all things related to preparing our students for success in their college and career journey. My name is Sonia Cacique, and I will be your host and guide on this exciting journey towards a bright future. Our mission is simple: to empower our parents and students by elevating their confidence and resourcefulness. We believe that you deserve all the tools and support necessary to open the doors to endless possibilities of success. And with our community, you don't have to do this alone. So come with me and let's get started. Welcome, everybody. Welcome to the College and Career Ready podcast. Today on our podcast, we have Shahar Link. He has been teaching in high schools and tutoring standardized tests for over 18 years, driven by just his determination to help students succeed on standardized tests and in high school. So I'm super excited to welcome him to our podcast. Welcome, Shahar. Welcome to the College and Career Ready podcast.
Thank you. I'm really excited to be here, and thank you for having me.
Tell us a little bit more about what you do and who you are.
Sure. So my name is Shahar Link. I founded Mindspire Tutoring and Test Prep 12 years ago in Durham, North Carolina. And we are now probably like the largest independent test prep tutoring company in maybe the state. We have an office in Durham. We have an office in Raleigh. I recently followed my wife out to Boulder, Colorado, where she got a job, and we live here now. And I'm growing Mindspire here, but it's still going strong in Durham and Raleigh. We have a director there who's doing a fabulous job, and we have 20 tutors and all of that. Before Mindspire, I was a high school teacher for 10 years. I taught history and economics in a couple of different schools on the East Coast and in the Bay Area of California. And before that, I was in graduate school at Stanford. I was working on a PhD, but I quit. So I got a master's and then said, I'm done. I grew up in New York. I have a wife, a son, 2 dogs, and 2 cats. So, pretty full life. And my favorite thing to do right now is hiking 14ers in Colorado, these big 14,000 foot mountains with my son. That's our passion outside of things.
That's awesome. Well, you're in a perfect location for that.
Yes, it's fun.
Super. Well, thank you for introducing yourself. And so the reason why we wanted to have you on the podcast is for test preparation and really helping our parents and students understand a little bit more about the ACT and SAT. So let's start off with sharing a little bit about the differences between SAT and ACT. So let's just assume we're giving a 101 for our parents.
Sure. So it's become a little bit more complicated now because the digital SAT is now in the mix. The digital SAT is starting. It's going to be given in March. So the last paper-based SAT will be in January. And after that, there will be no more paper-based SATs for anyone, anywhere. And everyone, beginning in March, will have to start taking the digital SAT. So that makes the question like, okay, now we have 3 tests. But for now, the SAT and ACT are the same length, roughly. It's about 5 minutes difference. They're both accepted by pretty much every university in the United States. I don't even think I have to say pretty much, like every university in the United States takes both. And they have a lot in common. They both have reading comprehension sections, and they both have sections about grammar and writing, and they both have math sections. One big difference is that the ACT has a science section, and that's a little bit different. But then again, the SAT throws in, like, into their reading part, they throw in science passages. So they're still testing science, but maybe not quite as, like, over the top. The ACT math section is a broader range of questions. There's more sort of advanced topics like maybe trigonometry, or they have matrices, and they have some harder kind of probability questions. Whereas the SAT is more focused on algebra and statistics, probability, but more narrowly focused. All of that being said, like one's not easier than the other, but they do play to certain strengths on weaknesses in kids. So if you're a really strong math student, the SAT is probably going to be better because the SAT is 50% math. There's no science thing kind of mixing it up. So a lot of times that will boost a score. The ACT tends to feel a little bit more straightforward. So in our experience, if kids take a baseline ACT and SAT before they start any prep, just a practice mock test, which we have almost everybody do, and the scores are the same, we'll push them more toward the ACT because it tends to be, in our experience for many kids, a little bit easier to master, a little bit easier to get your score up in test preparation. Not for everybody. The timing can be harder on the ACT, but in general. So that's a little bit. I just want to say again, though, like, it's the only way to really know like which test you're better at is to take both of them in a practice setting. Don't go out and pay $200 and take the official test, but go take practice tests. They're available online. We offer them every weekend online or in person, and see how you do on both of them. See which one you like better and study for the one that you're just better at. I know I'm talking a lot, but I'm going to say one more thing.
Yeah, no.
Students have really, now that we've started with the digital SAT, students really like it.
Really?
Yeah. So it's only 2 hours long. Okay. So that's huge, right? 3 hours and 15 minutes versus 2 hours. Like, for your typical 16-year-old, that's like an eternity of time has been saved by that hour, especially when it's taking a test. So that's number one. It's just shorter. So it's not as energetically draining a test. And it's also, the reading section is really different. On the current SAT and ACT, you have to read like a whole essay, like a 90 line, 100 lines, 6 paragraphs, and you have to read the whole thing, and then you go to the next page or whatever, and you answer 10 questions. With the new digital SAT, you read 1 paragraph, and then you answer a question about it. And then you read another paragraph, and you answer a different question about it. And it's not that the questions are easier. Like, the questions are still hard. You know, they can ask, like, what's the purpose of the third sentence? You know, that can be a hard question, but you're not reading for 4 minutes and then answering a bunch of questions. It's like right there. And for most students, they just feel like that is a much more comfortable situation. So I'm kind of excited. Like, this is the first time that I feel like the College Board, like, they've maybe done something right with this thing. And, you know, so that's something to keep in mind as well. If you're a junior now, if you just started your junior year, you're starting in a few weeks, the digital SAT is something to definitely consider.
Yeah, absolutely. So, and you mentioned practice exams. Is there a cost for those practice exams?
Not for us. Every student who is interested, we will give them the practice SAT and ACT for free. And again, if they're in North Carolina, great, they can do it in our office, but we do it online, and it's proctored every Saturday morning.
Nice.
We want it to be simulated. We want it to feel as much like the real thing as possible. So we do have a proctor. You sign into Zoom. They tell you when you have 5 minutes left, etc. And then at the end you get a score report with like a very detailed breakdown per question, categories of different types of questions, and how you did. And all of that's free for the SAT and ACT, like, first time.
Perfect. When do you recommend that students should be taking a practice exam? What's the earliest you think that they should start considering that?
The earliest is in their sophomore year, maybe like second semester. We do have some exceptional students who are, who can take the SAT in the beginning of their sophomore year and get a 1500. This is very rare. But if you can do that, then go right ahead. Most students are best served by starting this process in the summer before their junior year. So if they're starting their junior year now and they haven't like done these baseline practice tests, go ahead and do it now. That doesn't necessarily mean they're going to start tutoring right away or start prepping right away, but it gives you the wiggle room that, well, if my score was much lower than I thought it would be, and I have my eyes set on certain types of schools and I need to go up 300 points on the SAT, starting now is what you would need to do. And if you take the practice test and you're like, wow, I'm crushing this, I hardly need to do anything, then great. Don't do anything until the end of your junior year and go take your test. But at least this way you have enough time to make the right decision.
Absolutely. And that's a great point, because then you're kind of looking at your own score and the improvement that you need to make. And I literally just made a post about this, about, standardized testing. A lot of schools and parents are starting to get results from last year. And it's so hard for students to compare them to other students, as well as even compare them to siblings. I have twins and they're like night and day. And so I really encourage, the practice exams to know where they're starting off and where they need to do or practice for their own growth and their own development.
Right. Yeah. We don't talk about, if you do this much, you're going to get this score. It's not about that. What we talk about is if you do this much studying, you should go up this much. And It's about where you're starting. Everyone's different. But most students should be able to see like really nice improvements if they study hard and for an adequate amount of time. We do packages, and each package is sort of tied to an outcome that would be expected. So 25 hours, and that the minimum would be 100 points on the SAT if you study for 25 hours. And we actually sort of have a money back guarantee with that. Most students go up more than that. But the point is, it's about where you start and improving on that. Yeah, you can't. The comparison game is so tempting. And we all do it, but we also all have to train ourselves to notice when we're doing it and stop as soon as we can, because it just gets you nowhere. It's about you and pushing yourself to do the best you can.
Absolutely. Thank you for sharing that. And so let me ask you, in reference to universities, do they have a preference for SAT or ACT? What have you seen?
No, we've never seen anything like that. They all use pretty much, there's a concordance that the ACT and the SAT created together, saying, okay, a 25 ACT equals a 1200 SAT, whatever it might be.
Okay.
And so they just they take it and they compare it, and they all use that number, and they don't care which test you're taking. So what that means for the student is figure out which test you're going to do better at and study hard and take that one. Don't take them both. Don't study for both. It's just too much.
Good point. And as far as I do understand, some universities are opt-out testing. So tell us a little bit more about that.
Sure. So most universities at this point are what they call test optional, right?
Or test optional.
There are still some that require tests. The service academies come to mind. They all require the SAT or the ACT. So if you want to go to West Point or something, like, you're going to have to do well on your test. But most universities are test optional. However, even though they are test optional, there's a lot of data. We have 3-4 years now of test optional admissions data that shows that students who submit good scores are a good deal more likely to get in. And what good means is at or above the median for that school. So if you're going to a school, you could just Google this. What's the median SAT score for, whatever, University of Ohio, and it'll come up. And if you can get that score or better, then you should submit your score. And by doing so, you will have typically around twice as likely a likelihood of getting in. So it's a big deal. On the other hand, what that means is that still there are a lot of students getting in without test scores at this point. And that's a good thing. There are definitely students who work hard, study hard, even do a lot of test prep, and they don't get a score that matches with what they've been doing academically. And there could be a lot of reasons for that. Sometimes just the pressure of the test day of what this one day, and mentally it's hard, and they just don't perform as well as they really could. And for those types of students, it's nice to have test optional and still be able to get into the schools that they want to get into. So it's a little complex, and this is where someone like you really comes in. Like, you got to talk to your college counselor. You got to talk to someone who knows the full story of you, and can advise on whether or not you should submit, how hard you should study, whether you should keep going for one more point on the ACT or not. I mean, I talk to college counselors, and sometimes they'll say, no, this kid's good, he's done, doesn't need to work anymore. And sometimes they'll say, if you could get him one more point higher, please do that, And so it just kind of depends.
Yeah. My personal professional opinion is that regardless, I think it is still a good strategy for parents to try to have their child do or practice for an SAT or ACT and get the services they need to really do better, because the skills and the support and the resources are going to help them regardless once they get into college.
Yeah, I think that's a really important point, and that a lot of parents don't necessarily see at first, right?
Mm-hmm.
If a student goes up 150 points on their SAT, that means they've actually really learned how to do more math, how to read better. They've probably learned some really important grammar skills, like better use, meaning how to use commas and semicolons more effectively or correctly. And those are all these are crucial skills. You're going to be doing a lot of reading in college. You're going to be doing a lot of writing in college, even though ChatGPT is around, you still have to do it. You're probably going to do some math. And the test preparation process, there are tips and tricks. There are things like, okay, when they ask this types of question, you want to look for this. But that's about half of it. The other half is actually, oh, you never learned this in math, you have to learn this now.
Yes.
Or whatever it is. So there's real basic, important, critical thinking, reasoning, writing, math skills going on. And that's definitely a bonus.
I like that. So then when y'all are tutoring someone, y'all not just focus on the skills, the testing skills, but where there is an area of weakness and where they need to improve overall in a math concept or a math skill, correct?
Yeah. We focus the most on the lowest scoring sections because that's typically where we can see the most improvement. But what that means is that we're focusing the most on those areas that students, for whatever reason, aren't performing as well as they could or should be from high school. And there are a million reasons for that. But we're really pushing those weaker areas and trying to improve them. And, we do. It takes time. So there's real learning going on.
I love it. So, all right. So let's give some tips for parents and students on what could they do right now to, better prepare for SAT and ACT. Exams.
So the first thing is definitely get these baseline scores. Know where you stand. Many kids will take the PSAT in October. This will be completely digital. It'll be the new digital test. So they'll get a first experience of that, in about 6 weeks or 7 weeks for most students in the United States. So if you want to wait for that, it's okay. But the problem is the scores take a while to come back. So if you say, well, we're going to wait for the PSAT scores, then you're maybe looking at November, December. It might be a little sooner with the digital SAT. So I would suggest taking these baseline tests first and doing them soon. Once the school year really ramps up, it gets harder to do all of this stuff. So if you haven't started school yet, go ahead or do it in the first week or two. And once you have those baseline scores, then you start to look at, well, what do I think I want, to get? What do I need in order to get into some schools that I might be interested in? It might be a little bit soon for juniors who are just starting their junior year to know where they want to go, but it's time to start maybe doing some Googling and seeing, well, what's the what are some of the scores for some of the schools that I think I might want to get into? And then you look at the difference, right? If you're already there, then you can take a nice deep breath and a sigh of relief and say, okay, I don't have to work too hard on this, However, even there, it's like, as I'm sure test scores are often closely related to scholarships. There are scholarships that are given out directly based on how well you score on the SAT or ACT. So even if you're good enough to get into a school, often getting another 100 points will get you another $5,000 in scholarships. There's some, like University of South Carolina, for example, is one of the schools that are like that. They directly, the higher you get, the more money you get from the school to go there. So you just want to see how far you are away from desirable scores for you, and then make a study plan based on that. If you're 300 points away, start studying now. If you're 50 points away, wait a few months and see how it goes. We advise parents on all of this stuff down to very specific details, but
for sure,
whoever it is that you might want to work with, that's where you start. Get a baseline score, see where you want to go, and then create a plan based on that.
I love that. Is there any common tips that you would recommend someone that is easily overseen, or that you really want to emphasize as far as testing strategies?
Testing strategies. So it so much depends on the student. It's a little bit hard to answer that in a general way. One thing I can say is that the tests are very predictable, right? They don't change them. They maybe tweak every now and then. They'll be like, oh, I've never seen that math question before, but there are 60 math questions. So 1 out of 60 isn't going to change, the nature of the test. So by doing practice tests, and so for the ACT, we have 40 previously released ACTs from the last 10 years or so. So, and if you do 30 of those, that's a lot. Most students don't do 30, but some do. Just the more you're going to start, by the 10th time you're taking a practice math section, you're going to be like, seen it. They're just changing the numbers and the words around a little bit. They're not just, it becomes a very familiar thing. So I think there's I read this article about learning recently, and they said that for most people, the average is, once you make a mistake 6 times, the 7th time you probably won't make it anymore. But it takes most people making a mistake 6 times before they stop doing it. And we see that in our testing. It's like by the 7th practice section, that's when we see a big difference from their original score, because they just have to, we don't get something first time. That's not how our brains work. It takes a bunch of repeated, like, oh, should have done that. Oh, should have done it that way. Oh, should have done that 6 times. And then the 7th times you do it the right way. So my overall thing is, take practice tests.
Perfect.
And review your mistakes, and your score will go up. It's just
super. I like that you emphasize that. And actually, I heard that too in a counseling conference that we went last year. And they were mentioning that the best thing you can do is keep taking more practice exams, because the more familiar you are with it, the better you do.
Yeah. You do really need to review the mistakes that you made on that practice exam and really understand why you made that mistake. So for us, it's this very simple process. What is wrong about the wrong answer you chose, and what is right about the right answer that you need to recognize next time? And you want to be just super clear. What did I not know that made me choose the wrong answer? What do I need to know that made me choose the right answer, that would have led me to the right answer? If you do that for every single question you miss, and you walk away from each one with a very clear understanding of those 2 things, you're going to get better. You're just going to get better.
I love that. I love that. And I think that's a great tip for any standardized test. So great point. What about test anxiety? We know a lot of students, unfortunately, suffer from test anxiety. Any tips for that?
Sure. I mean, it's a lot like anxiety for anything. And one of the most powerful methods for dealing with anxiety around a specific situation is called exposure therapy. So I hope I'm not embarrassing her, but my sister got really scared of driving on highways all of a sudden. One day she woke up and she's like, I don't want to drive 55 miles an hour on a highway. It's terrifying. And she wouldn't do it. And exposure therapy means you know, the way you deal with that is, okay, you drive on a slow road, you get on the highway and then you get off the very next exit and you drive 30 miles an hour in the right lane so that you're not, you know, and you do that once a day for a month. And you know, so you very slowly expose yourself to the thing that's scary. And over time, you get desensitized to the fear. It's the same thing with tests. The exposure therapy is taking practice tests, but doing them in a proctored situation. So if you do it at home at your desk with your phone next to you and you text your friends, you know, every 10 minutes, then you're not really going to get over your fear of like the pressure part of it. So by taking proctored tests that are not the real thing, but feel pretty close to it with some other kids in the room, maybe, or on Zoom with some other kids in the virtual room, then if you do that 4, 5, 6 times, your test anxiety is definitely going to go down. That's probably the most important thing to do. Besides that, you know, there are typical sort of like breathing techniques. And when you feel yourself getting panicked, stop, close your eyes, take 3 deep breaths. There's some other stuff that we've done with square breathing, it's called, where it's like you breathe in for 3 seconds, you hold for 3 seconds, you breathe out 3 seconds, hold for 3 seconds. And it's like you envision this little square. And if you do that, it biologically, like you can't help but feel a little bit more relaxed if you do that a few times. So there are techniques that students should learn to work on being able to calm themselves down. But specifically for the tests, it's taking these simulated tests that we found to be the most useful remedy.
Perfect. And for our parents, you can get an insight as to how your child or your teen does by asking them after they take any test, how did they feel? How was their overall feeling? Did they feel that they did well? And then asking these questions, you can kind of pinpoint if they do, you know, have test anxiety or other things that might be affecting their performance.
Yeah, you definitely want to have conversations. How did it feel? Was it scary? And most students will be pretty honest, like,
yeah,
horrible, or no, that felt fine. You know, they'll tell you. You know, also, if you just see that, you know, a student does well in school, but is performing much lower on the test, that's often an indication that something like that might be going on.
Yeah, perfect. Let me ask you one other question as far as testing tips. What about students who are, for example, let's say have ADHD, can't sit still? Do you have any recommendations for them?
Yeah. Well, if the ADHD is serious enough to have someone look at it and maybe prescribe medications, that's definitely a conversation to have. I've worked with many students who have ADHD, and there can be a real love-hate thing with the medications, but excuse me, but they usually do help if it's a problem. Another thing that's really important for ADHD is getting accommodations. So in order to get accommodations, you have to apply for it. It's a little bit different for each test. But one thing I will say is that for most students who have accommodations, the ACT ends up being a better test, because one of the hardest things about the ACT is the quick timing of it. And if you have extra time accommodations, it takes the edge off of that. And then the questions just aren't as hard compared to the SAT. But so that's something to look at. But most importantly, get accommodations. If you have a diagnosis and you've had it for a few years, then in most cases, you can get accommodations, time and a half, or even double time. We had a student recently who had time and a half, and it wasn't really enough. And it was clear that he should have been able to get better scores, and he kept running out of time. And then he got double time, and then he got his score. It really made the difference. So there are a slew of accommodations besides time accommodations. There's accommodations where you're allowed to use a highlighter, or you're allowed to circle the answers in the book instead of the bubble sheet, because for some students with the bubbling, they mess up the bubbling all the time. And so you can actually not have to bubble on the answer sheet, but circle. It's called circle in book. Look into these because they can really help. I mean, the ADHD is especially, like, the timing is the biggest thing, because students with ADHD just need more time to sit with the problem in order to get through it, but they're just as capable of doing the work, and they just need that. And also with ADHD, like, this consistency in scheduling for preparation can be really big. Often parents do need to get a little bit more involved there. The student themselves, often it can be really hard for them when they're 16 years old to get all that straight. So there might need to be a little bit of assistance there, I found. And dyslexia is another learning difference, and we have a tutor who sort of specializes in dyslexic students, and she has dyslexia herself, and she's finishing up a PhD in the humanities. So all she does is read and write, and she has totally figured out, it's not just her. Like, you can figure out how to work with dyslexia and have no problem doing all of the reading and writing. It doesn't mean it's easy peasy, but it doesn't have to stop you from doing anything you want to do. So there are ways of working with all of these.
I love that. Thank you for sharing that. What other resources do you recommend for parents? Is there, our parents are always looking for, what else can we do? So we talked about the practice exams. Is there any other resources that you recommend?
I mean, there are free, like Khan Academy does a really good job with the SAT. They're the SAT people. They've partnered with the College Board. That is a good place to go. We have a thriving business of tutoring, even though Khan Academy has good. And the reason is because teenagers are teenagers, and they need a little bit more accountability, structure, and also social. Like, there has been a lot of research showing how much social interaction contributes to learning for teenagers. By the time we're adults, it's less important. I could sit and take a video course or something online and learn a lot. I don't need my friends doing it too. But when you're 16, you kind of need someone there. So the tutor or a class or whatever becomes that social area where learning is actually, like, deeply accelerated. So I would just, for some students, they're super mature and they can go to Khan Academy and do great, but most need a little something else. And there are a lot of places, obviously that's what we do, but a lot of people do what we do. And I would just encourage parents to look at those kinds of opportunities in their area or beyond. And, we do everything on Zoom as well, and everybody does. So you have both of those. Besides that, there's a part of me that wants to start getting into all the details of, like, various tips and tricks for different sections, but that gets boring. And besides that, that's what the tutors do. So yeah,
that's where you become more of a personalized handheld experience with the parent and the student. Yeah,
right.
I love that. Well, thank you so much for sharing these tips. I'm going to see if maybe we can get you back to tell us a little bit more about the digital exam and anything that you see a little bit more unique for that. But why don't you tell our audience about what you do, how they can connect with you?
Sure. So The easiest way to connect is go to our website. It's mindspire.com, MIND like mind, and then spire, SPIRE, like the second part of inspire, but it's just Mindspire. And there's a contact form on most pages of the website. Fill out the contact form and we will be in touch with you. And if you mention that you heard about us on this podcast, we will take 10% off any packages. We have very standard package rates. Just mention the podcast and we will take 10% off. That is the easiest way to get in touch with us. Someone will contact you same day or next day at the latest. There's no obligation. You can take these practice tests. We're not a big hard sell sort of company. We sell ourselves because, we do good work. So
I love that. Thank you so much, Shahar. I really appreciate it. And to our audience, to our parents, go right now, go to their website, fill out their form, because when we have a company that provides free resources, we need to take advantage of them, especially with the experience that you have had. And thank you for sharing a little bit about your knowledge, and hopefully we'll have you back on our podcast.
Thank you so much. It was a pleasure to be here. Great conversation. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Shahar. Have a great day. Hi, friend. Thank you for listening in. If you enjoyed this episode, it would mean so much to me if you share it with a friend. Share it with them right now, or even better, tag me so I can personally thank you for helping us build our community. I'm so thankful for each and every one of you. Let's keep in touch and I'll talk to you soon. Adios.